Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Virtual CrossWalk. I hope this finds you well as we bring to a close July of 2020. Let's hope it gets better. Just to bring you up to speed on a couple things. First, welcome. I'm glad that you chose to join us. This rhythm of continuing to come together, even if virtually, is important. And I hope that you're still able to do this and take advantage of developing your faith even as we go through this. The Board of Stewards met this past week, and we have decided to postpone our offering an on-campus service. The reason purely has to do with safety. We don't want to take the risk of infecting any of the people who would come to participate, and we also don't want to perpetuate a message of easing up on this thing in our community. As you are fully aware, in the last 6 weeks, the last month and a half, the number of cases of COVID-19 has doubled every 3 weeks. And that is not a good sign. This is not a time to let the foot off the pedal. This is a time to pay more attention if we're going to get this thing under control. We don't want to contribute to it being under or increasing its spread simply by being a leading church in Napa saying that we're going to go ahead and do this. As we talked about it with the board, if you are just dying for that kind of physical community, that this virtual thing just isn't cutting it, here's an idea. Reach out to me if that's where you're at, and I will connect you with other crosswalkers who feel just like you do. The very few, actually, that said that they're ready to come back on campus for a service. In our survey, it wasn't a very high number. It's very small because people are still very anxious about this, even if we do everything safely. But there are a handful of you that are interested in doing this. So here's an idea. Let me know who you are. I'll let you know who each other is. And you can go meet somewhere publicly, safely, maybe a city park or something, safely distanced, bring your own lawn chair. You guys can watch the premiere of our service at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning and sit around, have conversation, watch it together, and then talk together about it safely at a distance. Now, that's basically what we'd be doing on campus anyway, because it can't be the same. And so if you're dying for that, then let me know how I can connect you so that you can continue to do that in the comfort of your backyard or a park or whatever. It can be done. Anyway, if that's who you are, please reach out to me so that I can connect you all to each other to figure out how you can meet this component of your experience physically safely. Dar's off this week, so no announcements from her today. As many of you know, her father-in-law, Larry McCart, passed away a week and a half ago. And so with family in town and all that, she's taken some time for that. So no Dar this week, but she would certainly thank you for your support and remind you that we have opportunities to get together virtually, even if not physically. I've had great experiences leading the Zoom worship for the past several weeks. If you've not taken advantage of that, take advantage of it. It's about as close as we can get virtually. There's time for you to interact with each other before the service really gets rolling. And at the end of the service, we do something we don't even do, which we might start to do once we get back physically, which is there's time to just have a little Q&A, a little discussion after the service to talk about what struck us from the service. And there's good exchange. There's been some really meaty stuff that's come out of that. So if you've not tried that, we send out the link, a reminder link, every week, a couple times a week, and I encourage you to join us and just give it a shot. Some of you may be like, well, my hair's too messy on Sunday mornings, and I don't know what to do about that. Well, here's an idea. You don't have to have your video on when you choose to do Zoom. Some of you say, well, I don't want to say anything. Well, that's fine. Just keep yourself muted. You don't have to talk. That's okay. You can still be there. You can still see people you know on the screen. And that counts for something. There is some value to that. So please take advantage of what is offered so that you can make the most of this very different time. I do want to say thank you for your financial support of CrossWalk. CrossWalk is still CrossWalk, and we are still serving our community the best we can in creative ways, as we always try to do. That cannot happen without your support, and I deeply appreciate it. CrossWalk continues to be a leader in the community trying to encourage partnerships between churches and local organizations. And we're just thrilled to do it and privileged and honored to be able to do that. And we can't do that without your support. So thank you for your generosity. We're getting along okay. And if a crisis comes up and we need a little more, we'll let you know. But thank you for your steadfast support so far. It's really made all the difference. Okay. Well, let's hear a song or two, and then I'll have a meditation for you. And then I have a special guest speaker today. He doesn't know he's a guest speaker because this was a YouTube that was shot some time ago. But anyway, it's really good. You're not going to want to miss that. But first, some songs. We'll get into a meditation, and then we'll get into the teaching.
Controlling me, my God, from the flood, from the fire, you brought me out. I am alive with a faith, just like a child. I'm not afraid. I'm running wild for everything that will be done. I am yours and you are my deliverer. The one who carries us.
So the meditation I want to do with you today is one that we've done in the past, but I'm going to twist it a little bit today. This is from the Quaker tradition, actually. It's called palms up, palms down. And the way you do this is you simply place your palms down on your lap, and about halfway or so through the meditation, I'm going to invite you to turn your palms up. That's where I'm going to twist it a little bit. But for now, put your palms down on your lap. Sit in a comfortable position, close your eyes, and breathe deeply with me. Take a couple deep breaths just to kind of clear yourself and become present in the moment. As you find yourself in a regular breathing cycle, I want you to recognize that with your palms down, that is a a physical symbol of release, of releasing what you need to release into the arms of God today. So as you think through your body, how your body's doing, you may have pain, stiffness, tightness in your body. Could be evidence of stress. Why don't you take a moment, and as you exhale, just release the aches and pains of your body to the care of God. That those aches and pains would no longer command space in your brain. Maybe for you it's a task list today. All those things that are on your mind. Release those things. Recognize them, be aware of them, and release them into the care of God. For you, perhaps it's more on the emotional side of things. You're experiencing anxiety, stress, anger, frustration, whatever, sorrow, grief. Why don't you release those things into the arms of God as you breathe? I bet you've got some people or situations that you're praying for. Those are very good things to release into the arms of God, into the mind of God. So why don't you take a moment or two and release your prayer concerns, whatever they may be, into the presence of God, and trust them into God's care now. And now I invite you to turn your hands over so that your palms are facing up, and the back of your hands are on your lap. The first thing that we usually do with this posture is we recognize that it is an openness posture toward God. And we just want to sit in silence together, being open to the presence of God who is with us at all times. So just take a few cycles of breath and be open to the fact that you are surrounded by the presence of God, fully loved, fully cared for, complete in the presence of God who is always with you. Take a moment and just breathe, be still before God. As your palms remain face up, I want to take you into a new way of thinking about openness to God. I don't know if you'll have this memory from your childhood, or if you were a parent, your memory talking to your own child about this. But there are times in our lives when we recognize that we don't know so much. Maybe it's when we're a kid and we think we know it all until we don't. We do the best we can, and then it comes back on us because we're not as wise as we thought we were. And we go to our parent and we ask for help as a kid. How do I understand this? What happened? Where did it go wrong? And our parent just knows where we went wrong. It could be a math problem. It could be a relationship problem. I don't know what it might have been for you. But it's like all of a sudden we realize that we weren't as smart as we thought we were. Have you ever had one of those moments? Or maybe you were the parent and you've witnessed this with your own kid, that your kid comes to you for help and they're just blown away about how smart you are. Don't worry, it won't last. There will be another opportunity for them to let you know how smart they are. Anyway, I digress. As we continue in this, my point with all this is that we often run into a trap in our spiritual journey where we get complacent in our understanding of God. And we need to be reminded from time to time that we don't know so much, that the vastness of God is beyond our capacity for understanding. And that's a very good thing. And so I just want you to take a moment of silence to just admit it, to just be open to the fact that you don't know so much, and be open to our need to be open to more of God, to allow our minds to be blown, which sometimes can be very uncomfortable. So spend a moment of silence, just acknowledging you don't know so much, that God is very big, and choose to be open to that very big God today. God, we invite you to blow our minds. Amen. So today we are featuring a biblical scholar named Pete Enns, E-N-N-S. Pete Enns has a story that has been repeated too often in Christian history, where he was a favorite among the faith tradition, even his alma mater that loved him and formed him, and he was one of their champions in his school. And then he started having some new ideas, and his research led him to greater ideas that kind of bucked the system a little bit. And before you knew it, Pete Enns was no longer employed. I have been through this myself. When my positions on things have changed, it has carried a price. And Pete Enns certainly experienced this in significant ways. The guy's brilliant. He has a lot to say. He's written several books, all of which are helpful. He has one of the coolest podcasts out there, which is hilarious. He's funny, and yet incredibly insightful. And so this particular teaching, just a little warning, could bring you great comfort and freedom and allow your mind to be free. But when that happens, it also causes some anxiety. So you'll either be hating me for providing this teaching, or loving me, or both. Either way, please enjoy Pete Enns.
Richard Dawkins was once asked by someone who was thinking of becoming an atheist, "Can you recommend a book for me to read to sort of help me on my way?" And he said, "Yeah, the Bible." And the man's got a point, because believing in the God of the Bible, I don't mean like God in the abstract, but believing in the God of the Bible is not always easy. See, first of all, he lives in the sky. And Jesus ascends, he goes up to the sky to be with the Father, and where are they? Because there's really, technically speaking, no sky. Right? Its atmosphere just keeps going for like a bazillion trillion light years and forever. Or the God of the Bible endorses and supports the structures of slavery. There are even laws there about how to govern slaves, but there's nothing about emancipating them. Or God is transactional, right? If you obey, you'll be blessed. If you disobey, you'll be cursed. Which sounds a little harsh, not like, oh, I can't wait to get to know this God. It seems a little bit tense, Or God's sort of go-to means of conflict resolution in the Bible seems to be a lot of people die. Violence, right? I mean, war, pestilence, plague, famine, the ground opens up to swallow a few thousand people. I mean, think about this. Our big, long Bible, right? Genesis, you get to chapter 6 and everybody dies. Oh, Lord, that's it? That's all you got? You've already run out of patience. It's chapter 6 of the Bible, for heaven's sake. There's no plan B, in other words, right? Or God is very concerned about his reputation, honor, and shame. Don't shame me. I will be honored. I will be glorified. Which again is a bit harsh. It's like my students say, it seems like God is a little bit self-centered and really too concerned about what he looks like to other people. Or there are laws. Laws are fine. I'm not against law or anything like that. But some of the laws in the Bible, I mean, this is what the universe is about, right? Okay. You see that animal over there? You can eat that one. You see the one over there? I know it looks like that one, but it's got different kind of hooves and it chews differently. Unclean, don't eat it. And that thing that's coming out of the water, you think it's a fish, but it's not. It's got a hard shell. You can't eat that either. Oh, and let me see. You can stone your rebellious teenage son, and virgin daughters are the property of their fathers. Thus saith me. Any questions? Or God micromanages everything in the Bible. It seems like everything happens according to the word of the Lord. He even micromanages the weather as a form of punishment or reward. I remember years ago, Pat Robertson of the 700 Club was talking about a hurricane that was descending on the coast of Virginia, and he said this is God's punishment for the state of Virginia. I don't remember, they voted wrong or something. I have no idea what they did. But that night, Jon Stewart said, "Isn't it funny how God's wrath always shows up during hurricane season?" I miss him terribly, by the way. But I remember thinking to myself, that's it, right? That's the problem. The God of the Bible, the way he's portrayed, it's not easy to believe in this God because it doesn't fit our common experience. And our experience is going to affect how we think about God. Now, I've been told many times, you should never let your experience affect your theology. I'm like, well, what else do I got? I mean, I can't help it when and where I was born. I could teleport back into the Iron Age. That might be easier, but I can't do that. I live here, so I have to reimagine what God is like. And here's the good thing. See, the Bible, okay, it's sort of a problem, right? But the Bible also provides, it models a way forward. It's not a silver bullet, it's not an easy answer, but it models something for us that I think is of great spiritual benefit. It's basically this. The writers of the Bible are already reimagining the God of old for new experiences and new circumstances. I think that's a beautiful thing. See, this is why, of all the great stories in the Old Testament that I think talk about this, my two favorite are the books of Jonah and Job, because they're both about reimagining what God is like. So how does Jonah reimagine God? Well, Jonah, I'm not sure how you're going to take this, but I actually like your enemies, and I want them to prosper, and I want them saved, or whatever word we want to use. Even the Assyrians, the dreaded Assyrians, who were like the superpower semi-ISIS of the day, even them. Jonah doesn't like it, but he does it, and it works. See, the book of Jonah is reimagining the God of, let's say, the book of Nahum, another one of the minor prophets, where there, it's a very different tone about the Assyrians. There, God uses language like vengeance and destroy, and I've had it with you. And then the town of Nineveh, the city, the capital of Assyria, is wiped out. Now, Nahum has a little bit of historical veracity to it in this sense that in the year 612 BCE, the capital of Nineveh fell. Jonah is a parable. It's not about a fish. It's not about any of that stuff. It's a parable about who's an insider and who's an outsider to the God of the universe. And he gives a different kind of answer. Jonah reimagines what God is like. Because Jonah was written after the return from the Babylonian exile. So what? Here's a so what. They're in captivity for 50, 60 years. And they're getting to know people who were their enemies. And they're sort of like, honey, have you met the Babylonian neighbors? They're really, really nice. I mean, I don't understand a word they're saying, but they're nice. And I think they want us to come over for dinner or something. And they want to play date with our kids. They have beer, for heaven's sake. This is the most amazing place. Maybe, you know what? We could have been Babylonians had we been born here. But we were born someplace else. Is God just our private possession, or is God bigger than we might imagine? Maybe God cares for the enemy too. I had a similar experience. When I left seminary to go to graduate school, people said, okay, you go to Harvard, just don't learn anything. Just keep your head low. Don't just go to a good church, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. I ignored every word they said. But I got there and I realized that these people, well, forgive me, people, and who had no idea what I was thinking about. No idea. They couldn't really articulate what I believed. Just because they were born in Israel or other parts of the world. And I remember thinking to myself, first of all, they're nice people. And I enjoy their company, and they babysat my kids. But are they really on the outside looking in, and I'm on the inside looking out because of where I was born? Had I been born there, I'd be like them. Had they been born here, they might have been like me. So what kind of a God are we talking about here? If I can have compassion on them, oh, so help me, God better have more compassion than I do. I had to reimagine God from what I was taught based on my experience. Or the book of Job. I love the book of Job. Job reimagines God this way. Hey, are you suffering? Yeah, God's not doing that to you. Right? You know the story of Job? He's not doing well, okay? His friends come to him and they say, Job, you don't look too good. What did you do to deserve that? Right? Because see, his friends, they're working from this idea of a transactional God. If you obey, you'll be blessed. If you disobey, you'll be cursed. And they go to Job and they say, you know, Job, I've read the book, and like for the first few verses, you're doing great, right? You're blessed, like way blessed, more than anybody else. And you're like the best Yahweh worshiper ever in the history of humanity. It's like you do everything and you're so scrupulous. You see, there's got to be a causal connection. You obeyed and you're blessed. Now you're clearly cursed. Ipso facto, what did you do? What did you do to make that transaction change? And of course, what does Job say? Nothing. And his friends say, yeah, you did. And Job says, no, I didn't. And his friends say, yes, you did. And Job says, no, I didn't. And his friends say, yeah, you did. And Job says, no, I did. 36 chapters of this back and forth to drive home the point, right? And what's beautiful is you get to the end of this complicated and sort of weird ending to the book, but there's one moment in this book which for me is literally the highlight of the entire Old Testament. It's when Job is there with the friends. They're still friends apparently, but Job is with the friends and God shows up. And he looks at one of Job's friends and he says, my wrath is kindled against you and your friends, for you have not spoken rightly of me as my friend Job has. You catch that? Right? The boys are doing the whole transactional thing over here, and Job's like, okay, I get it, and I did that in chapter 1, but something happened. God can't be like that. I refuse to believe that God is like that. And God backs him up. It should be that easy, right? When we get into theological debates. God backs him up. See, this is a radical reimagining of the way God is portrayed. Forgive me, throughout much of the Old Testament, not all of it, but read Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, a bunch of the prophets, a bunch of other things. It's very transactional. And Job takes that to task. He's reimagining God. Why? Just like Jonah. On the basis of his experience, he's got to think about God differently. And speaking of thinking of God differently, let's talk about the Jesus part of the Bible, right? You've got the gospel. What is the gospel if not a rather hefty, sustained reimagining of the God of old? Not dismissing the God of old, but reimagining the God of old just the way Jews have been doing it for centuries before. Think of anything of semi-importance in the Old Testament. Something happens with it in the New. Think like the land, which is not semi-important. That's hugely important. All right, Abraham, here you go. I promise you this land is a perpetual holding. Don't screw it up, right? And if you're in the land, that means I'm happy with you. If you're outside the land, it means I'm not happy with you, right? Jesus, my kingdom is not of this world. Yeah, it is. It's about this geopolitical entity called the land of Canaan, which our God promised to us as a... No, this is the point. But you see, Jesus is reimagining what God is like. Maybe God isn't concerned about that piece of real estate. Or the temple, right? Temple's sort of a big deal in the Old Testament, right? This is where Well, a lot of stuff happens. The glory of God resides there. The Spirit of God is there. All these things. It's like this is the hub to connect with God. And what does Jesus say? I'm the temple. And then Paul takes it a step further, as he usually does, and he says to the church at Corinth, which was a loser church, by the way. They had nothing going for them, nothing right. He says to the church at Corinth, you are the temple of the Holy Spirit. See, it's reimagining the way in which God communes with humanity. That is a radical major shift. Or the law, right? The law is sort of important in the Old Testament, right? Here's the law. The law is that thing which defines the behaviors and the attitudes and the essence of what it means to be a child of Abraham. And Paul comes along and he says, doesn't throw it out, doesn't get rid of it, but he moves it to the periphery. The law now has a different function. And in its place, he puts, well, Jesus. So he says to the Gentiles, you too can be a child of Abraham, full-fledged child of Abraham, equal with your Jewish brothers and sisters, but not by this part, but by this part. That is a radical act of reimagining God and the community of God. We know this because Paul got a ton of opposition from his own Jewish brothers who were also followers of Jesus. Said, Paul, you went too far. Even Peter, right? Jesus's handpicked super disciple, right? It's too much for him. And James, Jesus's brother. I want to repeat that. Jesus's own brother. Both of them are like rulers of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. For them, it went too far. And Paul said, no, that's the gospel. And Paul won. Paul's act of reimagining the God of old won, and I know that because I'm standing here and I'm a Gentile. And I'm talking about Jesus, and you're out there, and if you're not of Jewish heritage, we all benefit from that radical act of reimagining. The church doesn't exist without that act of reimagining the God of old. And then for me, the big thing that, I have to tell you, this is the one that keeps me going some days when I'm not feeling great about all this stuff, which happens. And it's the cross. It's not enough to say, and I wish no one taught me this, and that bothers me. No one ever pointed this out to me. There's something I've always missed about this. The cross is not just, well, Jesus died for your sins, or Jesus suffered and died for your sins. It's Jesus was humiliated and shamed for you. In fact, God participates in this shaming and humiliating activity. That's what a cross is. The Romans perfected this means of execution, which was not just Jesus could have been beheaded. Why crucifixion? That's what the Romans do, and its purpose, this is documented, its purpose is to humiliate and to shame. And so this is how God shows up, the God of honor of the Old Testament, of mountains and all this creation. He shows up aligned with crucifixion. That's utter nonsense, which Paul says, to the Jews, it's a stumbling block. You better believe it is. To the Greeks, it's an offense. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it is. But for us, it's the wisdom of God. That is a major act of reimagining what God is like. Or in Romans, he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Why would he be ashamed? Because of how it begins. Right? See, okay, if you're living in the Greco-Roman world, or frankly, any time in human history, you're going to start a religion. Number one, okay, guys, we're agreed. We're not going to have our God shamed, right? Okay, good. Check that off the box. This is how it begins. So Paul has to say, I'm not ashamed, even though I know I should be, because that shaming is the power of God. That is a major act of reimagining what God is like. Our whole faith is based on this. And I think we all reimagine God. I know I do, all the time. It drives me crazy, but I don't know what else to do. I have to align my experience with my faith somehow. I have to have at least talking to each other. The big one for me is, the universe. How big can you get? That's the big one for me. It's very big. And it's also teeny tiny, and it's also very, very old, and now I've got to think of a God and wrap my arms around all that, and also this God cares about me, right? How can you have a personal God with a universe that's that big and impersonal? That's not a small question to ask. Does God count the hairs on my head? Does he listen when I pray? Listen, I stopped praying for a parking space at the mall a long time ago, all right? I'm not looking for that kind of individualized attention, but just a little bit of a sense of like, how do I know that I matter in this tremendous cosmos we live in? Or evolution. I mean, I wrote a book about evolution a few years ago, and I think about that a lot, and it's not really compatible with Christianity that I can see. It's not really compatible. And it's not because of Adam. That is frankly, forgive me, that is child's play. That's the easiest thing to deal with. The hard part is how much time it took, how relatively random it seems, and the fact that what makes evolution go is death. Death is evolution's buddy. Okay? Death is Christianity's enemy. Okay, now, work it out. How do those things come to... That's hard work, but it's an act of reimagination. Mental health, right? My family, there was mental health on both sides. My kids never had a chance, by the way. It just came down genetically, forget it, right? But, I mean, I get it. But the thing is that when something happens, I know where I need to go. To a really good doctor and a really good therapist and get the medication regulated, right? I don't I gotta pray and God will solve this. It's not reading the Bible or going to a Bible study or listening to a sermon series. That's not going to address it. It's like, okay, Lord, she's depressed. Why don't you sit this one out? I'm going to go call a psychiatrist, and maybe you're busy with it. Just take care of ISIS and hunger, and I'll just worry about this. So again, see, it's a matter of, is God really, are we just chemicals? And what does it mean to have a God over us, and how do these things work together? And I don't really know the answer to that, but I know that I have to think about God differently. I have to make room in my experience for a God like this. And I'm not looking for things. It's just I'm just alive and aware and breathing, and these things just hit me, and I'm just scratching the surface, as I'm sure you are too. Now, here's the thing. I could be wrong. I could be really, really wrong about how I reimagine God. But I am not wrong for trying. Right? Reimagining God and asking, what is God like here and now? That is the question of faith. That is the question of theology. And when I try to answer that question, I'm not being disloyal to the tradition. I'm actually doing what the tradition's already been doing. I'm not attacking the tradition and trying to kill it. I'm trying to keep it going, at least for myself, by addressing things and taking things into account that the tradition itself never dreamed of. When I'm trying to answer this question for myself, it's not like I'm being fast and loose with all this stuff. I'm actually taking my faith seriously and my experience seriously. Trying to answer the question, what is God like here and now? It's not trendy, it's not foolish, it's not foolhardy, it's not rebellion. It is, in fact, nothing less than our sacred responsibility as people of faith. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that teaching by Pete Enns. Even though it was just 20 minutes, he packed a lot into it and probably made you uncomfortable at times. What do we do with this Bible that has been given to us in this Christian story, and how do we understand our flexibility and capacity for being open to new ideas and being aware of our experiences and how they've already shaped our eyes and our vision of the world and our understanding? And can we at least be honest that that's the case, and then let our experience take us to new places that we need to go in the faith? We're going to take a look at a story, a letter actually, starting next week. I'm going to begin a 3-week series on the book of Colossians, which is a letter attributed to Paul. But academics cause us some problems with this. If you've been born into a tradition that says that the Bible is inerrant and infallible, which essentially means it's perfect and cannot be wrong, and that the view of the Bible's creation was taught to you as it was essentially breathed by God and therefore divinely inspired, so much so that the work of human hands really was negated by the overwhelming power and presence of God, then when you read the first few lines of the book of Colossians, which says, that this is a letter written by Paul for this church in ancient Colossae, that you have every confidence that this was actually a letter written by Paul for the people in this area of Mesopotamia. However, more recent scholarship in the last 100 years that is able to compare linguistics and other fragments and other writings from Paul, scholars increasingly are suggesting that Paul actually did not write this letter, that it is very likely written in Paul's name by his disciples, a group of people who followed his teachings carefully and carried on his work, using his name to write encouragement letters of instruction and, in some cases, admonition to local churches in the first century. This may be deeply disturbing to you. Later on, at the very end of the letter, you'll hear that Paul says, "I am writing this in my own hand now," as if to authenticate it. But what if that was just a normal thing that happened back in the first century, that nobody really blinked an eye of? That it was completely natural for disciples to write a letter in the name of their leader, and that was okay. What if the people who gave us the canon, the collection of books that we call our Christian Bible, what if they were fully aware that that was part of the tradition? And when they read Paul was writing this, they were just like, "Oh, probably not, but it didn't really matter." What if they didn't bat an eye about it? You and I who've been raised in a tradition that says, if it says it, that's exactly what it means. You and I are just blown away by this, and we feel like the whole Bible now is in question. But what if in antiquity they didn't think about it that way at all? That's an example of this being our problem, of our experience getting in the way of what God is trying to communicate. And this is true of many passages in the Bible, where if we've been formed in our theological development to say this must be what this must mean, then maybe we need to step back and reevaluate things and wonder what shaped that interpretation in the first place. And how are we going to move forward in our faith? How are we going to combine these elements which already are at play? Our head, our heart, our experience. How are we going to listen to these different voices to understand what the Scripture and the faith is trying to say to us, how God is trying to lead us, so that we can get this thing as right as we can, a right way of believing. That's what we're trying to do at CrossWalk, by the way. So as you do your work this week, I hope that you'll wonder what kinds of experiences have you had that have shaped your way of thinking about God. Maybe it's time to rethink those experiences, to see them for what they are, and to reevaluate what place and authority they have and how you choose to go forward. This in no way is a throwing out the Bible or throwing out theology at all. That's not what I'm saying. But maybe it's time for you to ask the serious question, why do you believe what you believe? Do you own it for yourself? This is a lifelong pursuit that leads to great consternation at times, but also leads to great joy and a depth of faith that can't be found otherwise. As we finish our time today together, we once again turn to the Lord's Prayer, which was a model prayer to help us remember that we don't know so much, that the God that we worship, although there's no literal heaven up there, we recognize with that our Father who art in heaven, that God is bigger than us, beyond us. And so we begin the prayer with humility, and it ends taking us to humility as well. Won't you pray it with me in closing? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you Wednesday. Show up. We have great discussions. I'd love to see you there. Until we meet again, peace to you.